Roger gonna be here tonight?
No, Roger will not be here tonight. He sent me an email a couple days ago, maybe it's last week, I think.
Are you ready, Mike?
Ready? Yep.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the November 23rd meeting of the DeSoto Planning Commission. Roll call.
Manson,
Present.
Garrett,
Present.
Templin, Lane, Milborn,
Present.
Schultz,
Present.
Fisher,
Here.
Lane.
Here.
Appears Commissioner Templin is missing.
Okay. Under general business, item A, approved planning commission agenda.
Manson makes a motion to approve the agenda.
Fisher, second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Approved. Item B, approved minutes of the planning commission meeting held on October the 26th, 2021.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on October 26, 2021.
We have a motion,
I'll second.
have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Item C, approved revised minutes of the planning commission meeting held on August 24th, 2021.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want a little clarification. We needed to put in the minutes that you actually officially opened the public hearing. That those terms just didn't get in there, so we went back, listened to the tape, and put in the exact moment in time that you did that. So we just want to make sure it was a public hearing item. We just need to clarify that a public hearing was actually held. So,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah, I think so. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All approve?
Aye.
Motion carries. Item D, disclosure of conflict of interest. Anybody? Seeing none. Item E, disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. Do we have any? Seeing none. Item 4, call to the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so at this time. Any presentation is for information purposes only, and no action will be taken. There is a 4-minute time limit. Do we have anybody anybody online?
Nobody online.
Okay. Item number 5, public hearing. Consider rezoning at 235 West 95th Street. Brad?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What you have before you is a rezoning for property on 95th Street. It was recently annexed into the city at the council meeting last month. Of course, when a property comes in from the county, we've been through this a few times, and carries its county zoning designation, and it needs to be rezoned to an appropriate DeSoto zoning category. Discussions with the applicant, and then of course looking at the zoning map, we felt that rural suburban was the appropriate zoning category, which is a large lot residential tract that's typically not hooked up to public sanitary sewers. And so that fit the bill here. As you can tell, that the tract itself is surrounded by rural agricultural type use and residential type use settings. The property across the street actually is zoned commercial, but it is agricultural in its use. There's not any buildings on it, there's no residences. It's really just being paid. Whoever owns the property, he's not spoken to, I'm sure it's just sort of banking the fact that it's on an interchange and they've got commercial zoning at some point. They will probably make a some sort of decision on that, but for the time being, the land use and the surrounding areas of this stretch of 95th Street are all rural residential tracts, and we felt that the RO subdivision was the most appropriate for this area. We did send out notification letters. Actually, there's a 200-foot buffer for people within city limits and a 1,000-foot buffer if you're outside the city limit. The county gets a 1,000-foot notification, so in this case, we just went with the entire 1,000-foot notification. Tract does have City of DeSoto, I say in the commercial area, and then there's one residence right behind the house in the south that's also within the City of DeSoto. So this whole area is kind of spotty, whether it's county or city, right along 95th Street, and continues in both directions, especially with some of these large lot residential tracts. As I had mentioned, the property is currently zoned RUR Rural Ag under Johnson County. The intent of the district is to provide agricultural uses that promote family farm development of rural areas. However, it's now within the City of DeSoto, and looking at the RO district, which permitted by right, actually, are single-family homes, in-home daycare, nursing care, and convalescent facilities. There are other things that can be do there, churches, things like that, but those would require a special use permit. Bed and breakfasts, cemeteries. As I talked earlier in the introductions, you can tell in the aerial photo that it's really the whole area is rural residential and surrounded by pretty much on all sides in the tract of north. While it is a commercial zone, it is agricultural in its use, it is being aided. There's no livestock or anything on it that I have noticed in my 5 years here now in DeSoto. Going through the zoning compatibility factors, character and neighborhood, I kind of touched on this. It is all rural suburban. We felt the RO zoning would be appropriate for this area. It's consistent with the surrounding zoning for the residences. And this tract does need to be rezoned to a DeSoto category, which it is not right now. The site has a single-family residence on it and a large accessory building, which is also something that's pretty common in the RO subdivision. We've approved a lot of accessory buildings in this zoning district over the last 10, 15 years. As far as is there a need in the community for this type of use, or will we be able to support it? One additional potential residence isn't going to impact it in the community at all. It's already been there, so the impact that DeSoto may have felt has already been absorbed. Whether or not it was officially in city limits or not, there will be no impacts to service accommodations, sheriff, fire, parks, schools. Will see no change from any previous conditions. There will be no impact on the street network by allowing this request. Also, there will be no impact, significant impact on the environment from just making a change from RUR to RO. And there won't be a significant impact on the community. One area that is a bit of a challenge is the extent to which the zoning amendment may detrimentally affect nearby property. In discussions with the applicant and also discussions with some of the neighbors, and then I also contacted Johnson County planning staff, is the applicant does have a concrete foundation business that he's been operating on the site with several employees and trucks. The RO subdivision, we don't allow that type of use. In fact, there's no relief. Johnson County does have a conditional use permit process that you might have been able to go through, but it's kind of challenging also. Also, the applicant has indicated a desire to be within the city of DeSoto, so they're annexed in. But also, during this process of discussing the annexation and rezoning, told them that there's really, you have to get your trucks out of there. You can't have more than one non-resident employee and 2 trucks. The applicant has agreed to find a new property and take those vehicles off site. So we will be obviously monitoring the situation and make sure that they adhere to their words, and if not, then we will have to take enforcement action. So that's kind of a caveat which we're looking at, but at this point the applicant's been open and told us, we talked about this is not going to work, we still want to continue, and they said yes, we're going to be part of the community. So The relative gain to public health, safety, and welfare from denying the rezoning request really is, once again, is minimal. Use is there, the residence is there, it's a well-kept property, there's a pond in front, there's a lot of buffering and screening around where the accessory building is. It is consistent with our comprehensive plan and our long-range land use plan. And with all these factors and the assurance that the applicant would relocate their trucks from the site, staff does recommend approval of this rezoning request. So with that, I understand for any questions that you all may have.
Are the applicants here?
Yes, that's right.
Do you have any questions for the board?
No?
We've been meeting, right?
Yeah, we've been talking for a while.
Okay. Any questions for Brad?
No, I got a question.
Okay.
You know, I store material out at my house. I got trucks out there. There's other companies that are storing their trucks, construction companies, at their residence. I mean, are you guys gonna go around and say, hey, you can't be there, you can't be there, you can't be there? I think we're gonna open up a can of worms.
Well, typically, we're sort of complaint-driven on some of these things, and as the discussion of the annexation came up, I contacted Johnson County staff, and when I just talked to some of the landowners, but one to the south or one to the west, they indicated there was a business operating there. So I guess the thing in this case, in the instance of a sole proprietorship, you can still have one truck and one non-resident employee at this site. So depending on exactly what's going on at some of these locations, and I know, Tim, you've got your plumbing business, but you do have a business office.
Right.
And I know that you told me a lot of your employees take the vehicles home with them. So yeah, they do come and go from your shop, your house. Vehicles aren't, as I understand, aren't parked there overnight.
Right.
And they come get some parts and leave, but they're not parking, they're not showing up to work at your house
Right.
and getting in a work truck and leaving. And that's kind of what's happening here, and that's when we make the distinction.
Do you have anything
No,
else? Todd?
Yeah, I just got a question about the annexation. I know it's not in front of the board on that. Was that the applicant's request to do that?
Yes,
Okay, it wasn't a city-driven thing, or,
correct.
okay, because all the other surrounding properties to the east and west are still in Johnson County, correct?
Yeah, that whole area of, as I mentioned, along 95th Street is kind of a lot of piano key areas of what's in the city and what's not. We've actually got a few areas where the city's all around, a few pieces. We actually have a few donut holes, so to speak, in our zoning map where it's actually Johnson County, surrounded by DeSoto. So it's kind of a strange situation, but it's going to continue in this area until
Do we have any other questions for Todd, or, I mean, for Mike?
Staff?
Staff? Try that one. Had a senior moment. Well, if there's no other questions, would entertain a motion?
I make a motion, rezone the property at,
No, Bob, you do need to open per the minutes, we have to open the
Oh.
public hearing and allow our public guests to speak.
Oh, yeah, I did miss that, didn't I? Okay. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Seeing none, let's motion.
okay, I make a motion to rezone the property at 32235 West 95th Street.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, point of clarification, planning commission recommends to the governing body. So this action will go forward to the governing body. So the motion will be recommended to the council.
Okay.
Roll call.
1 second. Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Templin, Lane,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Fisher.
Yes.
Motion carries.
No old business, new business. Consider final plat for Carriage House number 10. Brad?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a continuation of what we've seen for many years going on. The carriage houses are ready for a final plat for number 10. Actually, what happens is, the building, the structures, and the walls get put on, they need to then survey each individual track, because they do sell those buildings, and so it needs to be platted as an individual unit. So this really is just the details within the building itself. We approved the final plat a couple meetings ago, so all we're doing now is actually, the only change really is the off to the right in the upper left corner right there. That's the area that's now been surveyed with exact square footages, so those tracks can be sold.
And this is the last one, isn't it?
It is the last one in the original, I guess, piece of property. They are now starting on building permits. Actually, this is building Z, the one that's in the upper left,
Aren't they starting on this building now,
and they're starting on that one.
which is building A?
That is building A. Yes,
The alphabet's mixed up, but
a little bit.
Anybody have any questions for Brad? Do what? Seeing none,
I make a motion for approval of final plat number 10.
we have a motion,
I second it.
we have a second. All in favor, roll call?
Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Templin, Lane,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
motion carries.
And this goes before the city council also.
It does, well, this was a little strange on final plats. It goes to the council, but really only for acceptance of easements and rights of way. So technically, the planning commission is the approving body on a final plat. This one's a little strange because there's no easements or rights of way. And so we've had this discussion, do we even need to take it to the council, but it just as a matter of procedure.
Okay, so anything you recommend is rezoning.
Yeah, any quasi judicial action function of the governing body. So typically, if it requires a public hearing here, then it requires
A recommendation.
approval from the council. That's usually how you go.
Just out of curiosity on that new part that they're doing down there on the carriage houses, how long does that have to sit before they can build on it, since it's all landfill, or filled in?
Well, there's no prescribed length of time. We know, well, and actually with most of this area that's already been built was a landfill, and so we require geotechnical testing and compaction reports, and a geotechnical engineer's foundation design is really how that's handled. Most of this had been sitting for more than 10 years before they came in. The newer part, maybe not. Yeah, it's a construction thing.
Okay, item B, discuss solar regulations in the M1 zoning district. Brad?
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you all may well know, that the solar is doubled in size practically on the 18th. The council annexed 6,380 acres into the city of DeSoto. And that's not an exaggeration, Mike. I think he said the existing city was around a little over 7,000 acres.
Yeah, so here's what that looks like.
So you can see we have.
Gray's existing and the green's what was annexed last year.
Now, I don't know if there's any residents in this
Not a
6,375
one.
acres, but
That's not a deer.
Here,
Just out of
so we
curiosity,
might have doubled in size.
we were talking like 1,200 acres when this first came up about annexation. That to 6,000.
so the reason for that was the pre-development agreement that the city entered into also last week with the Sunflower owners calls for a tax incentive district that encompasses all of this 6,000 acres. And the concept is that the tax incentive district works where revenues generated by the first 1,000 acres can be used for cleanup efforts on the rest of the 6,000. And if all that 6,000 wasn't in the city of DeSoto, we wouldn't be able to offer that for the cleanup. We really think it's, and it's called a tax increment financing district in state statutes. The motivation behind that really was to provide a tool to clean up blighted properties. And so no better poster child in the state than a blighted property than this one. So we really feel like something of that nature was needed, either at the local level or at the state level, to enact the remaining cleanup on the remaining parts of the property and bring the property back into beneficial use. So that's why the whole 6,000.
So is it the military still responsible for remediating everything?
Well, so another interest, as quickly as I can, I'm gonna describe. There's kind of two buckets of cleanup, and one bucket is the environmentally hazardous stuff, the hazardous health hazardous stuff, the arsenic, the lead, the rocket propellants, the explosions, all that stuff. The other bucket is just cleaning up just the junk that's out there, old foundations and buildings, and just tearing stuff down so you can build something new. Two buckets. The Army has always maintained fiscal responsibility for the cleanup of the first bucket, the bad stuff. And they came in, Sunflower tried to do it for 10 years, the Army said, we have an obligation, so the Army came back in 4 years ago, really took over, and has really been going, progressing nicely on that. They think, and they started in the northern parts of the property and worked toward the south at the developer's request because they knew that'd be the most marketable piece of the property. They now have a schedule where they'll be done with all of that hazardous remediation within 3 or 4 years from now. They'll be done with the whole property. But that still leaves this bucket of all the buildings you see out there now are in this other bucket. You know, they got to tear those buildings down. They got to do away with the foundations. Got to take the road beds out. They got to level it all of that. That's they need funding mechanism to help them remediate that stuff.
Because they were burning all those buildings.
Well, and so the burning of the buildings was part of the bad stuff. Those buildings contained the nitrocotton in the rafters and the lead and the arsenic in the foundations and all that burning stuff that they did 15 years ago. That was part of the Army's bucket that they
One of
did.
those really looked pretty good.
Yeah, and the soil's being trucked off the site and all that. Really, the second bucket, they've started. They've done quite a bit, but the first bucket I would say is 85% done now. The second bucket's probably about 15% done. But it's also important to keep in mind, if you look at this green square here, there's a lot of that green square that never was contaminated, never had any structures on it, is God's green earth and can be developed, right? So we're the part up in the northern boot heel, as we call it, kind of this part up closest to 95th and Lexington, where we're showing kind of the first phases, largely was always clean and has remained clean. There's a couple areas that have been remediated. That's
So the other, I know there was a lot of competition from other areas that were wanting that, so it's annexed, it's ours.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was really ever competition. I mean, I don't know. We've heard other cities. The only thing that I can say with any certainty is 127th Street. The city has an annexation agreement with Gardner and with Olathe. And Olathe has agreed not to annex west of Gardner Road, and Gardner has agreed not to annex north of 127th. So 127th is kind of our agreement to be our southern line, and so that's why we annexed down to 127th here.
Okay.
We might have considered doing the whole thing if that agreement not been in place. So,
Thank you.
yep.
All right, so getting back to the discussion at hand, as part of all these talks and negotiations that have come into play, solar energy is one of the things that SRL has been approached to by outside development companies. And when Mike looked at our zoning, what's allowed in the M1 district, energy generation is allowed, but there's no standards, no nothing. It's Wild West, And certainly we weren't gonna, and solar energy would fit within the M1 district pretty well. But we've got nothing that talks about what it would look like as far as setbacks and fencing, buffering, glare, environmental impacts, cleanup. So fortunately, Johnson County had been going through this process, and they actually hired an outside consultant to help them with it. And they were very forthright, right, and gave us all the information that they had received. And also Douglas County has also been going through this same process of updating solar regulations, because there's a strong interest in a solar farm in Gardner, west of Gardner, in eastern Douglas County. And then also there's some discussion that SRL has at least been approached on having some solar generation capabilities out in Sunflower. So with that, the mayor actually tasked Mike and myself and now the planning commission with coming up with regulations to recommend to the city council. And what I did obviously was just did some research on, in general, what, you can kind of envision what a solar energy farm looks like. It's just a bunch of solar panels on posts, and sometimes they rotate, sometimes they're fixed, but they're 500,000 up to 2,000 acres. Typically, they've been in the Southwest where people thought that it's obviously a lot of sunlight, but panels now have gotten better where they can actually generate energy, and actually they're better in cooler climates because they lose a lot of capabilities to generate energy when it's so hot out in the desert. So they've actually started to pop up, in Ohio and Kansas and all over the country where you wouldn't think that there would be such a great demand, but the panels have gotten better. So they're looking at cooler and more northern climates in this whole process. So anyway, looking at our zoning district in the M1, we would require a site plan of some sort. But like I said, we don't have any standards or anything. We would just be looking at it like it was a big box distribution center, saying it's a solar energy facility. So I did put in our setbacks that what we would require, and yeah, there would be some screening, some fencing, but I don't know if that's necessarily particularly well geared towards solar energy. Now, these panels, from my understanding, stand up for anywhere from 15 to 20 feet in the air. So they're not huge, but I do think it would behoove us to regulate some sort of height on those things. Also, I do think we do need to look at screening, buffering like we would have. I don't know if we would require, we think about higher fencing, taller fencing, more trees, greater setbacks. Obviously, we want to protect any residents from any kind of activities. I don't know, I've not heard of any of the discussions of these panels create humming or buzzing or anything like that, but we would have to confirm that. And I think ultimately we would want to have some sort of outside consultant provide us a study. And some of the things that I put in here was the glare, the noise, aviation impacts, wildlife impacts. We want to make sure that we're not building floodplains, we're not messing up monarchs when they try to fly back to Canada, wherever they're going between here and Mexico. All those things that really come into play. And we're talking about big chunks of property. It's not just a piece here or there. One thing that Johnson County did that's kind of interesting is they had a smaller, medium-sized solar farm for 10-acre tracts, things like that. There also is some talk in the industry. I'm not an expert, I'm just really putting a toe in the water, but some of these panels are on top of buildings. So that could, if this is going to be a big distribution area, which that's sort of the main thrust of what SRL is looking, since we've got such good access to K10, and some of these buildings are 20,000 square feet, you can put a lot of solar panels on that. So we want to look at those types of issues. I don't know if that would be a separate category. I'm sort of thinking it would be a separate standalone district if we wanted to put them on top of the building. Or we could just say, no, can't do it. It's got to be we're not going to allow them on top of the building. One thing also that the county and Johnson County, rest of the county, it's always usually Johnson County. Johnson County and Douglas County. Douglas County is actually a little bit farther down the road than Johnson County, so you can actually kind of wring our hands a little bit more than most places do. they've limited 1,000 acres is their max size. City staff, county staff went through this whole process with the consultant and recommended to their planning commission 2,000 acres. And Johnson County Planning Commission said, no, we want to knock it back to 1,000, so now they're wrestling with whether or not we want to do that or not. So there's a couple things that we're going to have to make that same decision. 1,000 acres, 2,000 acres. The industry, folks in the solar industry want bigger tracts. Governing bodies typically want a little bit smaller tracts. Johnson, we talked about time limits. This is something that Mike and I and Patrick talked about is, do we want to put a sunset on this, 20 years, and then they've got to come back for another special use permit? Or can we let them go in perpetuity as long as they're following the rules and maintaining their property in the terms that are laid out in the special use permit, and we'll just keep going. What we sort of compromise is Patrick wants to have a sunset, Mike's a little bit more on making, as long as they're operating and they're operating well within the parameters of the special use permit. Why would we want to bring them back for the planning commission and city council? So what we came up with is this compromise. Council, after the term, the council can revoke the special use permit. It rolls over automatically, but the council chooses, they can say, we need to tell the owner that they need to renew their special use permit and go through the process again. So that's kind of where we are now. Not that I want to get too far into the weeds. This is just an introductory discussion on getting everybody to think about solar panels and how they might work and what we want to do. One thing also we talked about is there's going to be inspections and things like that. We're talking a 2,000 acre area. We're going to have steps, at least in my opinion, have some sort of administrative costs for somebody to continue to go out there and make sure panels and the fencing, buffering, and all the things that we're going to require are being met. So that, I don't know if it's going to be an acre per panel fee, per size of acreage, so those are some other things that we also need to talk about. And then, of course, the impact on residential areas. Right now is, there's nobody supposed to be living out at Sunflower. There might be somebody, but like I said, we've doubled in size. We've got all this space. We want to make sure we do protect any kind of residents. And I guess also, Mike, the county will retain, the Parks and Recs, county Parks and Recs will have a buffer around this whole area.
Yeah.
I don't know, it ranges in width. It's actually a pretty significant area for a trail system.
Yeah.
So there is sort of an automatic buffer that's going to go around the edges of the property. I still think within the track itself, you might need to have some additional buffering and screening, things like that.
So Brad, on the property that was annexed in on Thursday, what's the zoning on that?
It's RUR, as I understand it, same.
Yeah,
Okay.
it retains its county.
Okay,
but,
so anybody that comes in with this solar farm, they're gonna have to get it rezoned to M1.
Right, and I guess Mike can speak to this, but as I understand it, SRL is going to ask for M1, 6,000 acres.
Oh,
And when we need to talk about it, obviously, we'll get to it at the next.
Well, no, that
item.
wasn't the the development agreement stated an intent to rezone the initial 1,200 acres to light industrial. We didn't extend that to the whole
Okay.
6,000.
okay, because, I mean, I pulled up the future land use plan this afternoon, actually I did quite a bit of research on this today. I mean, that central area is just M1,
That's
M1
what
or
shows in the land
future
use.
use.
Future
M1.
use, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's about 2,900 acres is what that is, and it does have quite a bit of buffering around it, like you're talking about, with the existing creeks and everything, so.
And
Yeah.
as I recall, that M1 area, that area is probably the sort of heaviest use there. It was heavy industrial as the ammunition plant. It's where our water treatment plant is, it's where the old power plant was. Those things were heavy industrial in that area.
So
It's
really,
also
the
part of the
only,
area that's being cleaned up.
the only resident would be like Clearview City across the street from that M1, so everything else is kind of buffered except the Gabriel property.
Yes, and that's what's on, that will likely be on our next, our December agenda. And that, they are requesting they
Yeah, for that whole, yep.
80 acres.
Well, Brad, if they put in a 2,000 acre solar farm, we're selling that stuff, that energy to Evergy?
That was my question.
Well, that,
Yeah.
Mike started.
So, there's a lot we need to learn about it. It brings up some really interesting policy discussions, you know, just from the city standpoint. The first being, how is it taxed? For me, the first. How is it taxed? You know, in Kansas, equipment is tax exempt. So is Kansas gonna look at these solar panels like, that's just 2,000 acres of equipment, there's zero tax on it, so you're gonna get your agricultural tax value. That's where things like annual processing fees and things like that come into play. So we need to find that out. Regarding the Evergy's tie-in, so what happens with these industrial solar is, in order to sell the power that they generate on the market, they need to have a deal with a power pool. And in this region, it's the Southwest Power Pool that's in charge of Kansas and really everything in this area, all the way down to Texas, not including Oklahoma. The process for getting approval to connect to an appropriate location in that power grid and be able to sell them energy is years long right now. And the Sunflower folks have, companies they're talking to have they're already in the pipeline for this application. So they do need agreement with Evergy, the local energy provider, to be able to connect to the grid and sell the power that they generate. So that's a big part of this, and a big part of locating for sites. There's two parts to this. Like Brad said, you know, the panels are now more efficient in colder climates, so you're starting to see them in the area. But they still need to be in proximity to an area on the grid that can accept all this power, right? So if they're not, then they got to extend some great big transmission main somewhere. And so the Sunflower property is really well situated for that, because when the base was operating, they had a great big transmission main running right through the middle of the base. So that's a possible connection. There's also another possible connection toward the south end of the site where they're looking at the West Gardner facility. So that's kind of two check boxes. The third check box is, and my first question was, doesn't seem like land cost in Johnson County would be conducive to getting a cheap lease, you know, on land. And what I'm hearing is that the types of land that they're after are stuff that's no good for farming. Those you can lease those cheaply because, you know, they're not productive for farming. So kind of by default, I know Douglas County has in their regulations a sensitivity to prime farmland and preserving that, but kind of the economics of it by default direct these things away from those areas anyway. Sunflower is a good example of that. You know, it's not good farmland, really, by and large. Even before the Army came in the 1940s, wasn't a whole lot of really prime farmland out there. And then thirdly, just the nature of the cleanup. You know, you still have this second bucket of cleanup out there. And if you don't need to make it all smooth and round for millions of square foot of building or for nice neighborhoods and stuff, if you could maybe leave the old road beds there and leave some foundations there and put these panels up anyway, it's a really good placeholder land use for 20 or 30 or 40 years. 6,000 acres is going to take quite a while to develop, and I could see areas south of where we're looking at, you know, definitely south of the water plant maybe, on the southern third of our 6,000 acres, there's no chance of that developing in the next 30 or 40 years. 20 years. And so an industrial solar complex might be a decent placeholder of a land use category. But again, I know there's opposition, you know, and if you see some of the opposition efforts toward the West Gardner project, there's concerns with environmental, with animal corridors and runoff and other stuff, view shed sort of concerns. But and then the kind of the last interesting policy discussion is the more global altruistic motivation that we do need to transition off of fossil fuels into renewable energies, and there's this whole the global issue that everybody's trying to solve. But it's a tough sell for us here in DeSoto to say, you know, let's solve the problem of sea level rise right here in DeSoto. So, that's a tough sell. But, you know, I don't think the solar companies are looking to go out and place this and give no tax benefit to the local entities. That's the toughest part. You could argue that the only reason you need to collect taxes is to provide service, right? Well, right. Well, what service are you providing 2,000 acres of solar? You're not plowing snow out there. You're not pushing water out there. The cops aren't out there solving domestic disputes. I mean, there's not a lot of service needed for these things. So why do you need to collect a lot of tax, you know? So I don't have any answers to any of that, but all very interesting policy discussions and decisions. I'm sure Johns County, Douglas County are all making right now. So it's kind of an interesting concept. Just the last thing I'll add, there is potential here with an industrial solar component to Sunflower for what they call back of the meter type of an arrangement. And so that would be the power used on the property. So there's a solar farm out there, and the power is going to these buildings that you see out there, you know, to power them. That's back of the meter. That doesn't require a deal with the Southwest Power Pool. They're not selling that on the open market. They're selling that directly on site. So there's no bad part for the city there is that if you've got a user that you're counting on using a whole lot of power, we get franchise revenues off that power. Not insignificant, some of these producers that we're looking at recently. The franchise revenues wouldn't be there if it's a back of the meter deal. So, and Evergy doesn't really like them either for similar reasons. They can't sell power. So
You can't put a stipulation in that that they can't do that?
well, yeah, there's all sorts of ways. I mean,
Or
Yeah,
the city
there's-
get discounted rates on electricity?
well, I mean, there could be some sort of a pilot type of arrangement where, you know, there is some tax generated by the solar that goes back to all the entities. There's never any shortage of ways to tax people. We'll figure that part out.
Yeah.
You could put in a whole new subdivision down south and power it all off of solar and not get a dime from it.
Yeah, I don't have a good feel for how much power generation, like 1,000 acres of industrial solar, that 100 megawatts. I don't right now have a good feel for those numbers. It's not insignificant.
Well, there's actually two companies that are on the proposal, Savion and NextGen, isn't it?
Yeah, so my understanding is, yeah, you're right. So NextGen is the one primarily that's trying to do the West Gardner one. I didn't know that Savion is the one that has the connection with the Sunflower redevelopment.
Yeah, that was one that was in the Shawnee Mission Post.
Yeah, Savion was the one mentioned in that article. Yeah, they're the ones that have the connections there. I don't think they're involved in the West Gardner. I could be wrong about that.
The article said they were more interested in Sunflower.
Well, you know, it's coming. We don't have an application on the table, so that's good. If we did, I think the council would say, all right, we're going to moratorium on these till we figure out, just like the counties did, till we figure out what the best course is. And we will, yeah, well, we will be meeting with some representatives from Savion. They called me up today, or the Sunflower folks called me up today, and I want to arrange a meeting, just the mayor and staff mostly, in the next couple of weeks. So we'll know more after that. We'll know more tonight, get some feedback from you guys, and just proceed. But yeah, I think it's important to think, you know, probably start with the looking at future land use map. You know, because right now, like Justin said, it's complete. It's all light industrial. You know, all the way, and then heavy industrial. So if we want to get more granular about that and think about where it's best to maybe future plan for a holding type of a land use, because otherwise we're getting nothing from it now. You know, it's valued at agricultural, and we're getting our $70 for 100 acres of tax out there, and that's it.
If you pull up that future land use plan, I mean, the way you guys have it laid out, I mean, it's gonna be, I think, an easier sell, you know, because you have the M1 zoning kind
Yeah.
of contained, which it looks pretty good. So you have, I think, a mixed use on the south and a little bit on the south and west.
So 127th is, yeah, it's right down here. So it's mixed use, south of 115th.
Yeah, so I think that's gonna really help with like the screening and everything, because really the only one that would be essentially affected by it would be Clearview City.
And I can imagine, I mean, you're getting, this is a mile from there down to the south of this, to the south of that light industrial, that's a mile. You're not gonna see anything. That clear view to that. This shows the park land pretty well. We tried to mimic the land that's gonna be given to the parks with this ring there, so you can see it's gonna be Johnson County Park in the future on
So I mean,
Setbacks and buffers, I think that's pretty much already taken care of there.
that. That creeks on both sides, really.
That was my concern, because a project of 2,000 acres, that's a little different than putting a 200-acre industrial park out there
Yeah.
and trying to buffer the buildings from neighbors or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, if they're only, how tall, you said the tallest one is, 20 foot?
20 feet, yeah.
Geez, that's,
It's no wind farm. I mean, I'm glad they're not talking wind.
Yeah,
'cause
I'm
there's
glad you're not
lots
either.
of other things.
yeah.
so I guess what's the goal of
Well,
like, meetings like this? What are we trying to?
Well, eventually, we need to enact a text amendment that introduces special use permitting process for industrial solar. And so in the staff report, we gave you an example of what Johnson County's looking at, gave you an example of what Douglas County's looking at. We'll probably take a stab at some framework, you know, as a text amendment to come to you in the next month or following then. That's the ultimate goal
Okay.
before we get an application.
So I did look through, the Douglas County one is actually pretty good.
It's pretty concise. I wouldn't, yeah, I mean, Johnson County, they got a lot covered in there, but I like the Douglas County
Yeah,
one.
Douglas, it was a little bit over the top stuff around Douglas County.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, frankly, I need to learn a lot about these, from people who do it in the industry and, maybe the consultants that the county hired to do that. There's a lot I don't know about it. First of all, how it's taxed. I mean, I need to figure that out.
It'll be an interesting road.
Yeah.
We don't have anything on private, like homeowners solar, do we?
No, just building code. Yeah. Smaller scale stuff.
So then once that, I guess the policy gets drafted up, then we'll dive into the weeds on the setbacks and all that, the extent of the.
Well,
As
I
opposed
see
to
it all
just
coming at the same time, really. Well, the setbacks, the
Okay.
height, the length of turn, all those things are going to be something that the planning commission will recommend to the council.
Is there any kind of environmental issues with a solar farm? I mean,
Well, if you ask some, yes. I think some of the issues I've seen raised are animal travel corridors. Through them.
deer paths.
Deer paths, yeah. There's a potential concern with some like herbicides they might spray to keep the weeds down. Runoff. And I guess that could start to be an issue. Just the visual impacts. Those are really the only ones I could think of. I mean, you're not disturbing the ground, you're not digging up soil.
And part of that said something about battery storage. Do they?
Yeah, so if there are battery storage facilities, those do, that's a more intense sort of operation, probably do need a little closer scrutiny. Yeah.
No, we don't want another cleanup issue.
No,
No.
no.
Have you guys thought any more about, I saw something in there about the funding, that they haven't put a bond up. for the
Yeah,
cleanup.
so, I don't know which one, they have sort of a reclamation plan. really.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
kind of, after the term is over, the thought is the thing goes away,
Mm-hmm.
and so we need some bond, so you can take all this stuff out and fix, you know, whatever, you have foundations, poles in the ground
Yeah.
to get those taken care
I
of.
think it was Douglas County was the one.
I agree with you, Justin. I
Yeah.
could read Douglas's and kind of get through it and understand it a lot easier than Johnson.
Yeah, it-
You see that a lot with rock quarries. They'll have a reclamation plan and a bond
Okay.
required
okay.
to clean
Yeah.
up after stuff.
Didn't New Mexico or Arizona have a large solar field? It's been in this for several years.
I'm not sure, Bob.
Well, as I understand it, Bob, that's where the sort of solar industry started, was in the southwest and the
Right.
desert areas. As the panels have gotten better, they found that they're more efficient in a little bit cooler climates, so that's why you're starting to see them much more prevalent in the Midwest and even upper Midwest in Washington State. Their approach, or as these things going on, even though it's a lot of cloudy skies out there, but still the reflectiveness through the clouds actually make you pick up the solar energy that way.
Would it be of interest maybe to try to contact some of these people that have large solar farms and see what problems they've had in starting it up, and
Yeah. Yeah, it would be. Yep.
so we don't make the same mistakes?
Well, I'm glad it's a solar farm and not a wind generators that are going
Me too.
in. Yeah. 15 to 20 feet is,
Not different than 120,
yeah,
the
giant.
blades are
things.
120 foot long, so.
Will make a lot of noise and a lot of
I've
problems.
not really noticed any noise.
Well, is it, I'm just thinking, is that something we need to somehow put in the text amendment that we don't want those? Because right now, it just says M1.
Energy, yeah.
Generation,
Yeah,
and if
that's a
somebody
good point.
shows up and says, I want to put up a bunch of windmills.
Can we
Solar.
ban those legally?
Sure we could.
I think we ought to.
Yeah, sure we
Me
could.
too. I certainly don't want 1,000 acres or 2,000 acres of those out there.
Yeah, yeah.
As far apart as the space, there wouldn't be a whole lot of them out there, but still.
I still don't want them out there. I can deal with a little 15
Yeah,
or 20
well, so
foot.
for now, if you look at a wind map, you know, the United States, we're kind of on the edge of the good corridor, really. It stops about Salina, about where you stop seeing the wind farm.
Okay.
But that's not to say that that technology won't get better,
Mhm.
you know, and it'll creep this way, so that's a good thought.
Yeah, that's just ruined western Kansas.
Yeah,
It irritates me to drive out I-70, get out there about Lincoln, and that's all you see is miles of blades.
If you go 50, 54, 56 highway, east of Emporia, getting to be a lot of them down there around Lebo and stuff too. A lot of them. Yes.
well, I think what we'll do is work on a draft, you know, to kind of combine these two, or you start with Douglas's or whatever, and based on what we learn the next month or so, come to you with a draft, where we can start talking about specifics and a lot of these.
And you'll
We
let us
also
know
like,
what the people say that you've talked to that have started up. You'll
Yeah.
contact them before we get anything
Yeah.
we've got approved.
yeah, and we'll have met with this company that's interested in sunflower, so, you know, hear their side too.
So then we'll see the draft and then make our comments, and then will it go to the public, or the following month will it go to the
It'd
public?
probably be the following month.
Okay.
Yeah, so it'd have to be a public hearing here.
So we have our chance to discuss it before they put their
Yeah.
2 cents.
Yeah.
So we're probably looking at maybe 3 or 4 or 5 meetings before we,
I would think at least 3
kind of like
here.
poll signs, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or chickens.
Not quite as high stakes though as a pole sign. We did the pole signs 2 or 3 times, if you'll remember.
Yeah,
I don't think we're done with them yet.
More than 2 or 3.
don't even say that.
Taco Bell coming in.
All right,
You,
Mr.
Have anything else for us on this?
No, I think we've got enough to, like I said, this was just an introductory to the election, know that this is coming down the pike. We want to
Okay,
roll our sleeves up and all get educated on it. Come up with
Being interesting.
Our own policy, and how we want to move forward.
yeah, it is gonna be an interesting 3 or 4 months.
It's exciting that that,
Yeah.
that seems like a good use for that property.
Well, if you don't have any more on that, Brad, you wanna talk about the next meeting?
Yeah, I guess the reason is we're coming up on holidays, and the 21st, or the 28th would actually be our next scheduled planning commission meeting. I don't know what people's plans are, if there might be conflicts with that day. We really do need to have a meeting in December. We have a zoning application that came in today, actually on the Gabriel property, that is zoned to M1, so we need to know for which day is gonna work to have a quorum for the planning commission. And that's, I just need some feedback, some discussion.
I'd be a fan of maybe the 21st, move it up a week. That week of the 28th is all. I mean, it's
Well, it is kind of, it's
Between
kind of a
Christmas
dead
and
week. A
New
lot of
Year's.
people take that whole time off between Christmas and New Year's.
You could be in Mexico.
No, I don't think that's
What's the consensus?
I don't care either way.
I don't either.
I'm good with the 28th of the, I think, now let me double check.
I kind of agree with Todd. Can we move it up to the 21st?
Yeah, we can with the,
Is
There
that
are people
enough?
coming in town and they're staying longer after we get so, but nobody's gonna.
yeah, we're prepared for the 21st. Actually, Mike and I talked about, yeah, we can make the 21st.
Yeah, we'll get the notice in the paper. It'll be in the paper by the 30th, so that'll get, that notification. And we'll have to get the letters out, the notification letters out on Monday, so same thing. So we'll have those notifications out in time for the meeting on the 21st.
Is that
So
the-
everybody's in agreement on the 21st?
I'm good.
Yep.
I think I'm good.
You, Mike?
Yeah,
Fred?
here, yeah.
Yeah, that works. I guess I think we'll
Maybe
need-
let's have a motion
need a
to
motion.
move it. If we could have a motion to move the December meeting to the 23rd.
Need a motion to have the next meeting on December the 21st.
I make such motion.
We have a motion.
Second?
We have a second. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Manson,
Yes.
Garrett,
Yes.
Timplin, Lane,
Yes.
Milborn,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
motion carried.
Anybody have any questions for staff?
Is there anything else going to be on the agenda, or is it just that?
There might be a couple things, but nothing significant. Might be a final plat coming
I do have one thing to ask you, Mike. Has the city considered a exhaust brake ordinance?
It's not something I've heard come up.
Well, I've noticed that some of these big trucks coming down past Lariat are using exhaust brakes coming down that little hill there.
83rd,
Right.
yeah.
And the people that live just to the south of that have to sit there and listen to that.
Yeah. Okay.
No, with all the dump trucks.
The only place that would really benefit,
Wonder.
what we really don't need is coming down Cedar Creek Hill.
Yeah.
But I can't see using it anywhere else there in town.
We're gonna run into that again in more issues in the springtime when they close the ramp anyway.
Oh, I'll tell you what, we,
So that's how the truck traffic will be
When
Yeah,
they
it's
do what?
abnormal. When they
It's gonna be-
close, be the westbound lane of K-10, it's that for the bridge, there won't be trucks coming.
Yeah.
It'll be worse. It'll be bad next year.
we are, we're gonna try and encourage KDOT to tighten up the timeframes for their projects, so the closure might not have to be 9 months long.
Yeah.
I know they do bridges on I-35 in a couple months.
If Clarkson should be able to tear that down and rebuild it faster.
I know. The Egyptians could build it faster. Yeah, so we're trying, but it's gonna happen, you're right, but we're trying maybe instead of a 9-month closure, maybe it could be a 6 or a 5, so we'll do our best. You know, that's, the bridges need fixed though, there's no doubt about that. We don't begrudge it.
It's never ending. It's in bridges that fall apart.
Yeah, they
They're all in,
They've been completely ignored since they were built.
And now, between here and this, it's trash.
Yeah.
seems like the ones they built in the last 20 years just go to pot in a hurry.
It's gotta work local.
Do we have anything else for staff? Anybody else have any questions of any kind? Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
We have a motion.
Fisher, second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. We are adjourned.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Happy Thanksgiving,